We are in.
Yeah, hello, welcome everyone.
Hi.
We will just wait for some more participants to join us this morning. I'm sure everyone's kind of logging in from previous meetings and lots on their calendars this morning. But thank you so much for making the time to join us. So we'll give it a couple of moments.
That number is increasing fairly rapidly, which is awesome to see.
It sure is. Nice one. Well, I think it's probably time to get started. So welcome everyone. Thank you, for taking the time to join us today. This is part three of our Hire Like a Hero webinar series. And today we're going to have a really exciting panel discussion on creating a great candidate experience. So my name is Jenny. I'm the Talent Acquisition Manager here at Employment Hero. Today, I'm joined by two of our guest panelists. We have Sinead Connolly, founder of Lotus People, and we have Jamie Finnegan, People and Talent Advisor. Um, I both know Sinead and Jamie, so I think it would be really wonderful if they briefly introduce themselves to our audience today. So, Sinead, why don't you start us off?
Thanks, Jenny. It is so lovely to be here. I'm really, really excited about this conversation. So, as you said, I'm the founder of Lotus People Recruitment. I set the agency up 9 years ago with a huge focus on candidate experience. That's been sort of the cornerstone of what we're about over the last 9 years. So, this topic is very relevant and something I'm very passionate about. We recruit corporate services roles, so across HR, business support, customer service, marketing, finance, all across different industries with offices in Sydney and Brisbane. So yeah, really looking forward to this chat.
Excellent. Love to hear some expansion there for you, Sinead. And we'll hand it over to Jamie. Quick intro from you, please.
Sure thing. I'm Jamie. I spent 5 years working in a recruitment agency called Mitchell Lake back in the day, working pretty much exclusively with Australian and New Zealand-based startups and scale-ups. Then had the fortune of spending a lovely 6 years with a company called Finder, and was their global head of talent. Went on an awesome journey there of growing from 80 to over 600 people during that period of time, expanding into markets and all the fun stuff. And since then I've been doing some fractional work, some people and talent advisory across a few different companies, which is a kind of nice blend of the two at the moment. So that's me.
Wonderful. Well, thanks for being here with us today. So, before we do kind of officially kick things off, just a bit of housekeeping for everyone. We're going to have a live Q&A open through the session today. So, we really encourage all of the audience participants to put in some questions into the Q&A box. And then we're going to use some time at the end of today's webinar to answer some of them live, which will be really great to open up the conversation. I'd also like to say that today's webinar is going to be recorded, and we will share the recording and the slides once the session has been concluded. But in terms of agenda for today's session, there are going to be a few topics that we're going to be covering on how to create a great candidate experience. We're going to be looking at the why candidate experience matters, building trust and transparency, personalizing your hiring process at scale, common pitfalls to avoid in your process, and some actionable takeaways and strategies. And to help us guide our discussion today, we want to make it as valuable as possible. We'd like to start today's session by launching a quick poll, and that's to gain your insight on what are you most excited about taking away from today's webinar. So I believe the poll's been actioned. Would love for you to start putting in your answers. Perhaps today you're looking to take away some insights on how to secure top talent, tips on how to enhance the candidate experience, perhaps it's proven strategies for achieving success, or maybe it's all of the above. So would love to hear your thoughts on that today. So take a moment, put in your answer. As those results start to come through, our panel will be factoring those into their responses as we kind of explore today's topics. So without further ado, I think it might actually be time to start the conversation. So we're going to kick off, and I think today it's really important to start with why candidate experience matters and understanding the importance of that. So, Sinead, let's start with you. It also seems fitting to do so. Your business, Lotus People, actually very recently won the Best Agency Candidate Experience Award. Congratulations. So can you tell us why candidate experience matters and what are some of the positive impacts this can have on your brand, your company, and hiring process?
Yeah, for sure. Like, thank you. It's so good to see this topic being spoken about. It was actually something that was a huge topic during the sort of pandemic and COVID era because it was so hard to find people, and so the candidate experience sort of dictated whether or not you'd actually end up hiring anyone at all. And since the market's sort of been how it's been a bit funny, and it's been probably a little bit less tricky to I mean, still a hard market, but it's been a very different market. I have just seen this conversation being spoken about less. So to see this come up and us having this conversation, I think it is essential no matter what market we're in. So I'm really glad that we're sort of here and speaking about it. Look, I think it's twofold. I think one, from a talent perspective, every business obviously needs good people in order to grow. And so how you treat the people who are interested in working for you and how that experience is for them will impact the caliber of the people that you're able to attract and will impact the caliber of people that you get into the business to deliver on strategic goals. So fundamentally, from an employer brand perspective, it is crucial in how you bring people in and who you hire. But I think maybe on the other side of it that probably doesn't get spoken about as much is just the negative impact that a bad candidate or applicant experience can have to your brand and to your business. So many businesses put so much energy and time and money and investment into their sales and customer experience and marketing functions. But sometimes recruitment and talent acquisition can actually be an area where it doesn't get a lot of thought. It tends to be reactive. And perhaps people or businesses lose sight of the fact that if you treat someone badly or ghost them, and we still see it happening within this process, that's one person who might tell 5 of their friends or family members, and how they think of your brand and your business is going to be set in their mind. So you might have lost a X amount of customers throughout one recruitment process. So it's twofold. I think it has a really big impact in quite a few different ways.
Yeah, couldn't agree with you more. And look, that is actually going to be one of our topic of discussion today around some kind of common mistakes to avoid. So we're going to definitely explore the good and the bad. Jamie, is there anything that you would like to add to that? Are there any insights that you would like to share on why the candidate experience really holds significant importance?
I think Sinead summed it up pretty well there. But I think one piece I would add would be just having worked in founder-led tech companies, I think that, you know, there's a huge aim there about driving efficiency and doing things the right way and driving revenue outcomes. You'd have the same thing, Jenny, with Employment Hero. I know that, again, having good candidate experience leads into that as well. It's not purely a talent acquisition function, it's an overall business function. You know, I think that a candidate experience can be, like say, from the employer brand when they first kind of interact with your business the whole way through to whether it's an offer or a rejection, phone call, email, whatever it may be. Maybe the second time they apply, maybe they refer someone. There's so many key touch points there where you can really have an impact on the candidate and where you can show your business in the best light. And I think that if you're not paying attention to those things, you really are missing a trick. It's often about doing the basic things really well and just setting that up for success. So yeah, I think it's not one of those things that you need huge budgets for necessarily. I think it's something that with the right approach and the right amount of effort and put in, most companies can do really well. It's just about investing the time. Yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah. Again, really, really great points there. So thank you both. I think that's a really great way to start today's discussion. So I think we'll move into now why, not just the why, sorry, on how to kind of look at the how. So an essential element in any successful kind of hiring process is building trust, having transparency with your candidates, really, really critical that candidates feel valued and confident throughout their journey. Otherwise, yeah, it can make or break the candidate experience and ultimately perhaps even decision making at those later stages. So, Sinead, I'd love to understand from your perspective, actually working in an agency environment that is representing many candidates, helping them find work. How have you and your team earned trust and built transparency with your candidates? And then on the flip side of that, maybe some of your tips that you might have to employers to help them foster trust at every stage of the hiring process.
Yeah, for sure. Look, it's you're absolutely right. I think trust is a crucial sort of pillar for these processes, and I think we can, depending on the area that we work in, if we are in recruitment or in HR, or we're just in a business that hires a lot, it can just become the day-to-day. And I think so easily we can forget the human side of it. And so you're right, that trust and that sort of, I guess, rapport or transparency with candidates and individuals is really important to get the outcome that you want as a business, but also to make sure that, of course, fundamentally you're just treating people well and looking after the people in the process as well. So I think in terms of earning trust and what we see, I mean, we are very lucky in that we have a bird's eye view into so many different organizations. We recruit for everything from SMEs to large globals to sort of everything in the middle. And I think that allows us to really see how it's been being done well in terms of that sort of candidate trust and that building candidate engagement piece. So for us, I think through the thousands of people that we see every year, the thing that we really make sure that we do is over communicate. So I think that is the number one thing that we hear from candidates, is just that they were ghosted, they didn't hear back, they were at final stages. I've heard from C-suite candidates who've had sort of 6, 7, 8 stages in a process and have never heard back from the company themselves. So things like that are still happening, which is wild. But I think in terms of over communication, what we do is from the very beginning, when we're working with an organization, we just try and get as much information as possible. So that when we are, from the moment we engage a candidate, or even before we engage them, from when we're sort of figuring out what information to communicate to the market, writing an advert, we know exactly how the entire process is going to run. We know how many stages there are. We have all the information we need to be able to over communicate to people so that they know exactly what's happening up front. There's no surprises. They don't leave an interview wondering what the next step will be. And we support them in sort of being very prepared as well. So I think that's how we do it. It is purely a over communication piece that allows us and the team to really make sure that there's no question marks and that the candidates felt held throughout the process. So yeah, I think that's probably the way we do it. And in terms of tips for employers, so to help them create trust and to sort of start that process, I think honestly it's as easy, and it's very straightforward advice, but I think really just doing what you say you're going to do. People ask me all the time, you've built this agency, we're so well known for our candidate experience, as you mentioned, there's award wins around it, it's a big thing that we sort of pride ourselves on. And I always get the question, how do you do it? And it honestly is, it's a shame, but it honestly is just sort of committing to doing what we say we're going to do, and really making sure that the training is in our business to make sure that everyone is aware of our sort of standards and what we expect everyone to sort of to be like and how they treat people. So I think really being clear on doing what you say you're going to do. If you're going to get back to someone and you say you're going to get back to them by a certain time, it's so easy and it happens so often for that to just fall off to-do lists. But I think consistency in letting people know where they stand, in removing as much uncertainty as possible within a process that is inevitably hugely uncertain, I think that really builds trust. And I think that allows people to feel a little bit more safe and more held when they're going through the recruitment process.
Yeah, fantastic answer there, Sinead. And, it's the fundamentals of building that relationship, right? So, we need to be consistent and do as we say. Jamie, how have you seen trust and transparency impact the long-term success of new hires from an internal hiring and talent management perspective? Can you share any specific maybe strategies or some examples that have worked well in your experience?
Yeah, for sure. I think there's probably two parts to that. So one is obviously the internal process itself in the first place, and your internal stakeholders, if that's a hiring manager, a founder, another person in your talent team, whoever it may be. So I think there's the first piece there is building that internal trust and that internal transparency, and making sure that you've got, as Sinead mentions there, you've got your basics right, whether that's you've got a briefing document set up that maybe outlines the role title, the salary band, the direct reports, the key interactions, the responsibilities, some of the key selling points, all these things. Again, if you're on the same wavelength as much as possible with the hiring manager or the founder, whoever it may be that you're interacting with internally, that transcends through you to the candidates you're speaking with in market. I think that then the follow-on piece of that is also to share everything, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I think it's as much as you're pitching an opportunity to work in a business and a role, you want to tell people all about all the good things. I think that it only enhances the candidate experience, and I think often gets candidates more excited actually talking about the challenges that a business is facing sometimes, rather than what's gone well. I think that if you can share honest, actionable things that you're working in, whether it's the digital marketing team that are putting in a new CRM, or it's a engineering team that are trying to grow their leadership function and expand that out, if it's an executive function that are looking for some more rigor around their finance team, there's so many options you could have there. And I think that the challenges that you're sharing there, again, are potential ways for that candidate to actually add value to your business. But it also gives them an opportunity to understand maybe what isn't working as well, or where things do need to be improved. So it gives them a real view of that. One of the worst candidate experiences I feel you can create is not telling them that, or being unrealistic about it, them joining and figuring that out after 6 months when they could have figured that out during the process. Again, when you're talking about trust and transparency, you're in a position there of people putting their trust in you as an individual. You spend a lot of your time at work working in this role and with these people that you're going to be partnering with. And if you're being missold something, or maybe you haven't been shown the full picture, then that's obviously not going to be a great experience, and it's going to lead to more attrition, and there's several other knock-on effects of that are negative for the business. So I think that some of the key actionable pieces there, I guess, to summarize that, would be having strong trust and transparency internally with your key stakeholders, making sure that you're communicating that clearly, whether that's good, bad, or ugly, to the candidates that are in the process. And then I guess last point, just around what Sinead had mentioned there, to keep the updates coming thick and fast throughout the process. I think that whether it's there isn't an update, call, message, email, whatever it may be, if it is, look, we set out this process and this rubric initially, we've changed this slightly. It's okay if you're in a fast-moving business that things change. That's kind of something that the candidate is also going to have to be get used to. But I think that communicating that clearly, and maybe the reasoning behind that as well, is another way to just make sure that everyone's on the same page from start to finish of the process and beyond that as well.
Yeah, and absolutely. Please, Sinead.
I was going to weigh in on that as well. I was just going to say, sorry to cut you off, Jenny. I completely agree with you on that, Jamie. And I think your point around sort of speaking to the challenges and being completely upfront about that, I think that's something else, as well as sort of anecdotal feedback of people being ghosted and not hearing back about processes. The other thing that we see a lot of is the fact that someone has been missold throughout a recruitment process and they get into an organization and it just isn't sort of the picture that was given to them throughout the interview process itself. And so I think to be really clear on that, and to exactly as you said, Jamie, it's something that from our sort of agency and external experience, it's definitely something we see a lot of as well. And I think that is something that really appeals to candidates, and the right candidate will get excited by sort of what the challenge is and sort of that road ahead. It can be very easy to sort of sell all the good bits, but the reality is far, it's gonna end up in a better place. I love that point.
Yeah, I was going to completely agree with Jamie's points and even with yourself here, Sinead. Like, if I think about the most common question that candidates normally ask me in a process, it is the challenges. Like, it's all good to know about, you know, what are the highlights and the benefits and the perks, but actually, like, day to day, like, what are the challenges that I'm going to face? And particularly maybe when you're speaking to a more experienced or senior candidate, they want to be the problem solvers. They want to seek out those problems and challenges and find out where they fit in the puzzle piece. So yeah, some really, really great strategies and examples shared there. Thank you so much. We're going to move to our next topic, and we're going to now look at how do we ensure that we personalize, maintain personalization throughout the entire recruitment process. So for example, as Jamie said, it might be when businesses are scaling and moving really, really fast. It might also just be managing a really peak hiring period that it is experiencing high volume. So candidates often express feeling just like a number. Yep, they might be ghosted in the application process. So in order to combat this in today's competitive market, we need to, I guess, effectively provide a personalized experience to candidates, but doing it in a scalable manner. So I think we'll continue with you on this, Jamie. How do you strike the right balance between maintaining efficiency and ensuring there's still a human touch in recruitment? I'd love to hear your thoughts on the role that perhaps technology or tools like an ATS, even artificial intelligence, how does that role play in achieving this type of balance?
Yeah, sure. I think, look, firstly, it's not a new issue. I think it's an age-old problem in terms of striking that balance between making sure that people feel like, you are working with them one-on-one throughout the process, but also various other stakeholders are making sure that you're being as efficient as possible in doing so. Which, thankfully, because of technology, I think that, if you lean into some of those advancements and kind of leverage them in the right way, they can be super helpful in ensuring scalability. I still think the human element is needed there for the personalization. Obviously, I'm not saying that, we're in an age where the machines are taking over or AI is taking our jobs necessarily. I think it's automating repetitive parts of people's roles, which they probably don't love doing anyway. So I think it's something, again, to kind of latch onto and kind of to leverage properly where you can. I'm very fortunate to work with one business at the moment who's an AI company, and it's incredible the things that they're doing with leveraging large language models and various pieces of technology. I think a couple of things that spring to mind for me when you talk about tools there, they're not necessarily ATSs. I know that there's some fantastic tools out there doing some really cool things and taking kind of data and using analytics and leveraging that. I would say that, I know Employment Hero has a smart match product that helps you kind of sift through some things quicker, and now has a kind of, it's based on the brief of the role that helps you with that. There's other products and services out there that also help with that. I think a couple I wanted to mention, there's a company called Pyn. I had the very good fortune of kind of having Joris, who's the founder of that company, consult to us for a small period of time, and running a kind of people and culture offsite when I was at Finder. After connecting with him, so I think they have a really cool tool that's worth checking out as well. That's Pyn. They have a kind of employee journey map where you can kind of look at everything from pre-boarding to onboarding and beyond that as well. I think also there's a tool that a fellow called Steve Gard has called Benchmarks. I think it's Benchmark with CX at the end, basically, and it's kind of data-driven candidate experience. So you can take real example benchmarks of data from the market and use that then for when you're designing your own initiatives and things there. So again, they're kind of a couple of pieces of technology I think you can leverage. There's heaps you can use to kind of save your time and effort nowadays as well. But I think that, I guess, just as much as we can talk about the automation and the AI and all these other pieces of technology, I also want to kind of mention the personalization piece there. I think that at the end of the day, we're people dealing with people. And I think that as much as, yes, we want to drive as much efficiency as possible in these processes, we have to also be aware that, I'm not saying we have to, call people every day to keep them updated on something. I think that's probably overkill and probably maybe has a negative candidate experience in some ways if you're doing that. But I do think there's being very honest with people. Again, coming back to the last point about trust and transparency, I think the personalization of that is not giving generic feedback. So, for example, if you've set out to hire give an example, like, I don't know, a senior software engineer role, and you've got your rubric in there, and it's about, certain technologies they need to have worked with, and maybe scale of a business that you'd like them to have done, projects they've run, whatever it may be. I think sharing actionable feedback for the candidate directly, that you gather that feedback from the hiring manager and the interview panel that has key data points in there, not just there were stronger candidates. I think that's really lazy candidate feedback to give. If anyone ever gives that kind of feedback, it's just, what do you do with that? I think it has to, whatever feedback you provide to a candidate, if they're unsuccessful in getting the role this time around, I think it has to be actionable and something they can use, something that's insightful and maybe will help them, an area they can improve in. And again, it's linked to specifically the rubric you've outlined at the beginning of the process with the hiring manager, the founder, the client, whoever it may be, depending on the context. So again, I think there's so many kind of touch points you can talk about there, but I think that's a particularly important one that I've heard isn't done very well by a number of people that I've spoken to, which I think is a real shame, because I think it's a real missed trick there, I think, for businesses to show a good candidate experience at that point. I've had candidates actually talk about, the business in a positive way, even though when they haven't got a role, because of the way that process was managed and because of the feedback that was shared with them that was actually actionable and helped them in the future. I also think it doesn't take much when someone is unsuccessful in a role to help them. You, as much as, yes, you are working for Lotus or Employment Hero or Finder or wherever you're working, if that person's a good person and maybe the role wasn't quite right for them this time around, can you help them in their search elsewhere, whether it's sharing their profile, making introductions, whatever it might be. Again, obviously that's not something that you can, there's a scalability thing there as well. And I think that's about kind of, what networks can you leverage to share that within? There's the communities that you can share people's profiles with, given obviously with their permission, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's a few tips, I guess, there around scalability and personalization.
Yeah, really, really great tips. Thanks, Jamie. And I think, that's definitely a point to highlight is, we don't want to take away the human element that is so apparent in recruitment. It's just about, how do we scale and make it more efficient? And, using technology and tools to do that, take away those kind of administrative tasks, absolutely is critical to help you continue, prioritizing the important parts of the recruitment process by calling your candidates, communicating with them, keeping that trust and transparency throughout the process. Sinead, we'd love you to add maybe some of your tips. Anything that you feel is the right approach to balancing personalization at scale? Is simply leveraging technology enough?
Yeah, look, I probably won't add a huge amount outside of what Jamie said, because I think he touched on such important points. And I think in summary, I absolutely agree. I think you can automate certain parts of the process. We have it in our system so that if someone progresses to an earlier stage, depending on how we flag it, a certain automatic email gets sent out. It looks completely personalized. It might not be an email en masse, but it's still one step that's automated once they've progressed through. And then once we start meeting with people and going through those stages, I think we have kind of update emails, and we can trigger a lot of automated things through our ATS. But then, exactly as Jamie said, it's not going to replace those human interactions. I think to Jamie's point, that clear feedback, that supporting people. It's something that I, from a business leadership perspective, I think a lot about efficiencies and how we can obviously make our process more seamless. And I think the things that I keep coming up against again and again and keep sort of going back to is that we could have a lot of these things automated, and we could sort of have generic emails that go back to everyone, but we also get a huge volume of people saying, can you review my CV and let me know your feedback? Even if we haven't, say, put them forward for a role, this is just at the very initial stages. And that volume of work that comes through is actually quite high. And so we do have a choice to say, do we just sort of say, well, we're not working with you, email deleted, or do we go back to them and take the time? And we do the second one. And those types of tasks, like, they can't be automated. Like, maybe, yes, we can use, whether it's Copilot to help draft responses, or we can use ChatGPT to do a quick look at the resume. Like, of course, we can start to use AI, but at the same time, the thing that I think will make businesses stand out is the decision around, yes, we're going to look at technology to make things more efficient, but also how much time do we actually want to invest, and how much energy do we want to put into the people who go through, the applicants and candidates who go through these recruitment processes. Because again, to my earlier point, it's having a good experience. Them having a good experience with you is also probably converting, depending on what business you have, converting customers. So yeah, I think it's there's definitely not a one size fits all or an answer at this point. There's amazing technology out there. There's probably too much technology. We're all in sort of either implementation fatigue or tech research fatigue stage. But I think fundamentally we can't override the impact that the human experience can sort of have when we're looking at hiring people and bringing them into our businesses.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think even both of you have made kind of a clear point that while some of your candidates might not necessarily be successful, they might one day be, I don't know, a customer or a referral. So it really is just maintaining those relationships. But yeah, how do we ensure that we don't lose that personalization when there's obviously so much involved in recruitment? So thank you both. Really, really great insights there. We're now going to take a turn into our next topic. And look, we've talked a lot about positive ways that can create a great candidate experience. However, it's not always going to be calm seas and smooth sailing in every hiring process. So equally, it's important to just be aware of what can derail a positive candidate experience. So yeah, moving into our next topic, we're going to explore some of the common pitfalls to avoid. We don't want to, sabotage our candidate experiences, and more importantly, how do we prevent it? So we're going to raise awareness and address these challenges, so this can help ensure a smoother process and make it more engaging as well. So let's stay with you, Sinead. In your experience, what are some common mistakes in the hiring processes that can lead to a poor candidate experience? And ultimately, we don't want this to hinder the employer's ability to secure top talent. So what can we be done to combat this?
Yeah, for sure. And look, I'm sure Jamie will have some awesome ideas on this as well, actually being internally within a talent team. And I speak sort of, again, from that bird's eye view of working with so many businesses, but not actually being in them. But from what I see in Lotus, and when we're hiring, we have about 20 people in the team at the moment. So this is something I think about when we're hiring. This is something we advise and consult businesses on. I think one of the most common mistakes is just a lack of accountability within the recruitment process. Who is owning that candidate and applicant experience? We work with businesses that don't have TA teams, that don't necessarily have big HR teams, but then we also do work with larger businesses that have all of that, but then the hiring manager isn't sure whether at what point the sort of I guess the control gets passed over from TA or from recruitment over to them. So I think really understanding the process and understanding how many people are in the process and at what point who has accountability and responsibility for the person and the people who are going through it. So who's responsible for going through all of the applications? Are they aware of what your company views as a good time or a reasonable time to get back to people? Have you decided that you're going to get back to everyone, even if it's just a generic, sorry, we've already filled the role, or you're not fitting the brief? So I think really understanding that, and having as much knowledge about the process, and ensure that all of the different people who are across the process are actually speaking to each other. One thing that I really see happen in businesses is just not necessarily, and Jamie, you spoke to this earlier with some technology, I think, around journey mapping, but I always recommend mapping out the recruitment process and allocating sort of the people responsible for each stage. And this is something even with us, I mentioned before we came live that we're hiring at the moment for one of our divisions, and it's something that, because time has passed since we last looked at it, we needed to put our heads together as a leadership team and say, okay, what is our process? How many stages are we doing? And I think knowing that in advance can really make the experience a lot easier for the people who go through the process. It removes some of that uncertainty that I spoke about earlier. And also, I think this is very relevant to businesses of all sizes. I don't think this is a small business or a large business thing or issue, but I think looking at the recruitment process from a marketing perspective, a recruitment and talent acquisition perspective, and a HR perspective, so that when you're looking at your employer brand and how it's going out to market, you're looking at your processes and the applicant journey, and then you're also looking at onboarding and making sure what was spoken to in the beginning and throughout the recruitment process is actually being adhered to. It's really touches a lot of different facets, and I think each of those areas, again, whether it's a big or small business, they need to sort of be speaking to each other. The other thing I'd include there is just really being clear on what the interview process looks like. Jamie mentioned that things change. We do it as well. You never know what might comes up, but I think just having an idea in advance can really help things be clear, and also just tying in, and I'm sure this would have been the case in the businesses you've worked in, Jamie, but really being clear on how you're interviewing people based on your company values. If you have values that you live by and that you want to hire on, it's preparing everyone who's involved in the interviews on the types of questions that could be relevant based on the different values that you have in the business. And all of that, mapping the process and everything else I just mentioned, it requires time, it requires a strategy session, it requires actionables, it requires time and energy. And I think it is so worth doing, because even if it makes the next few interview processes run a lot smoother and you get great candidates from it, it will just make the biggest difference. So yeah, there's a lot of work to be done, but they're definitely some of the common mistakes.
Couldn't agree with you more. We've done something very, very similar here at Employment Hero, just mapping out that process is ensuring everyone that's involved in the hiring, process, the panel, interview questions, all of that is prepared, because, yeah, you don't want to waste the candidate's time or your time, not being organized. So Jamie, maybe there's been some common missteps or challenges that you've observed or encountered in the hiring processes that can negatively impact the candidate experience. So yeah, feel free to chime in and share any alternative approaches that you could find avoiding these pitfalls.
Yeah, no, never. We've always done everything perfectly. So no, I'm joking. There's been so many over the time. And again, these are all parts of, again, working in a scaling business. What was fit for purpose yesterday isn't fit for purpose tomorrow. What got you to here won't get you to where you need to get to after that. So it's kind of, there's a constant evolution of your processes and your tools and your systems and the way that you judge that success as well. So I think that I guess definitely agree with Sinead's point there for sure around interview preparation. I think making sure that your candidate and the panel are both prepared on that, so that there's a clear, again, talked about the rubric earlier, you have a clear vision of this is how we're judging success on this interview. Not just that the panel understand that, but also the candidate understands that, how you're going to be judging them. It doesn't mean you have to give to the nth degree everything that they'll be, every question they'll be asked, so they can prepare in advance, but it's more like they understand the key themes of what is going to be covered and kind of what you're looking to gain for from that, whether you tell them it's a behavioural interview, it's a cross-functional one, it's a case study in advance, and obviously share some prep information on all those things. And again, you've got that mapped out yourself internally, and why are you doing it in that order? Why are you including those steps? What are you trying to gain from them? Are they relevant for the stage or the kind of level of role you're hiring as well? So again, just make sure that's fit for purpose. I guess like a bit of a story that we had a value at Finder called Go Live, and it was all about launching things, you know, getting them out there into the world, getting feedback on them and improving them. Obviously, in some cases, that's brilliant if you're thinking about rapid, you know, prototyping, product development, and getting real user feedback and making things, you know, improving them as you go. And that's kind of, it served Finder really well and still does, I believe, to this day, you know, in terms of having that kind of approach and looking for people who kind of align with that value of how they work as well. However, I think sometimes my interpretation of that wasn't always just to go fast with the minimum. It was kind of, I came up with an idea while I was there, which was go slow to go live. And it didn't mean that we just like went at a snail's pace, but it meant that we had it's almost like an MVP, right? So we had the basic information we need, rather than going, we need a senior engineer, and you just post the job ad for a generic senior engineer, and then you kind of work out as you go what you're looking for. It's a massively inefficient way to hire, and it's also a really terrible candidate experience most of the time. It's very rare that a candidate has a great experience when you're still figuring out what you need as you're interviewing people. So I think that the baseline kind of prep work that was done there was the briefing doc was filled out. We had kind of the key stakeholders, the steps, what was being assessed, all the pieces to pitch the role as well, the challenges, as we've already mentioned, that were in there. So I think once we had all that kind of stuff, and then we posted the job ad, and then we started reaching out to people, the process was a lot more efficient. So it didn't take as long to fill the role. Therefore, the company wasn't spending as much money on, you know, people trying to have inefficient processes and hire people more slowly. We were able to meet the hiring needs a lot more efficiently and provide a much better candidate experience throughout from start to finish there. So again, I think sometimes it might be the startup way, or maybe it's viewed as kind of glorified in a tech company to just get stuff out there and improve it as you go. And sometimes, yeah, in certain scenarios that does work well, and that is the way to go. I think oftentimes in hiring, that isn't always the way to go. And certainly when you're talking about candidate experience, it doesn't necessarily transcend to a good experience for them. Couple of other bits, I won't go on forever, but the workforce planning, I think, is a massively important part to all this. I think if you're talking about, we're talking about scalability before this, you know, I think planning that properly, so it's not you've got 1 quarter with mass hiring happening and 3 quarters with no hiring, and then people are there just stressed and having inefficient processes, and, you know, struggling to find the time to provide feedback, whatever it may be. That provides a really poor candidate experience, rather than having a more measured approach to when do we need these roles hired, when do the critical roles need to be in place, do we have the right talent team in place to hire the roles we need? If not, how do we supplement that with either agency support? Maybe we have some of the kind of provider that can help us with that as well. So again, I think workforce planning has a big part to play in setting candidate experience up for success. Again, a lot of this stuff is relatively common knowledge, I think, but I think doing the basics right, as I've mentioned, is the foundation for all this other stuff. That then when you want to do the bells and whistles things, if this stuff isn't done first, that stuff doesn't matter. So I think doing the basics right is important. And the last one, kind of just again a bit of a story from my time with Finder, was we had we put in a monthly measure of CNPS, or candidate net promoter score, and we would have our every candidate who went past application stage would be sent a survey about their experience with the business, and we tracked that month on month to see kind of, you know, how well we were performing or how well we weren't performing. I think one trick we missed there early on was kind of utilizing that data or segmenting it a little bit more. We had a good number overall. It was a couple of years ago now, so I don't have the exact numbers for you to just reel off, but we had some good quality numbers. And I think that one thing we missed there was segmenting that by, you know, we had this going out to candidates in the US, the UK, Australia, Philippines, Poland, New Zealand. And I think that we should have segmented that a bit earlier to see where the gaps were early on. I think we also had it by department eventually, and we actually figured out that at one stage there was a bit of a missing link there in our data function in one of our kind of key markets. And that was, again, relatively easily addressed. It was, again, more about coming back and going, what are we hiring for here? And a little bit of interview training and kind of prep there really helped to shift the numbers there. But again, if you are kind of at that stage where you are taking in that data, don't just look at the generic overall number, segment that as much as you can and kind of dig into the detail where you can as well.
And I think just to add on to that, Jamie, I completely agree. And I think the data side of it and measuring it is essential. Like I think with how we run Lotus, it is something that it's in every one-to-one, the NPS score, how we're tracking the candidates that are surveyed, the clients that are surveyed. It's in our quarterly reviews, it's in our performance plans. Like it's something that we absolutely speak to as a value, but we also track, measure, and have that accountability for everyone in the business throughout the entire process. And when you have that data and you can see sort of what's working, what's not, it then loops in, similar to what I was saying before, it loops into HR and L&D and comes down to, okay, well, are we falling down as a business in these particular areas? And I think not every business is going to have that in place, but I do think that having some sort of measurement around this and some sort of accountability is really important to ensure that it is actually rolled out consistently.
Wow, fantastic insights and answers here from two very professional individuals who know the market and processes very well. So thank you very much. We're going to conclude the session in the last kind of part that we would love to hear from Jamie and Sinead today are your proven strategies to enhance the candidate experience. So Jamie, what are some of your proven methods that you've implemented to elevate the candidate experience? And that's to have a lasting impact on your recruitment efforts.
I would say partnership, as I've already mentioned, is a key piece of this. So it's not just going to be done by one individual. It's not going to be done just purely by a talent team. I think that having the most impactful measure on improving candidate experiences when everyone's involved in that. I always used to say, I find it that everyone's part of the talent team. Obviously, there was people who had talent in their title. Other people had people in their title, whatever it may be. But I think everyone who works in that business is part of the team. Everyone can represent the business at events. Everyone can refer people. Everyone can be involved in an interview panel, whatever it may be. So I think that truly getting everyone on board with why candidate experience is important. I think kind of almost if you take the format from this event today and ran people through that internally at your business and went why it matters, why trust and transparency is important, how do you balance personalization, scalability. I think people would genuinely be interested in that kind of stuff who were outside of the people and talent space. And I think that they would kind of see how they can actually, again, have an impact there. One example quickly of just how did that at Finder was we worked on a thing as a team. And again, this was something I didn't want to just drive myself. I wanted to have the whole team involved, and we came up with our key kind of talent pillars internally. And again, everyone had input into this and we came up with them together, and they were attraction, diversity, equity, inclusion and belonging, experience and selection. And I think we had those at kind of the center of everything we did. They became part of defining our OKRs every quarter. They became part of our talent program of work that we did. And I think specifically for the experience piece, that was all about candidate experience. Obviously the others are about what they are, but I think some of the key things we did there was we had a rotation of everyone in the talent team would take a project in a specific pillar space every quarter and then rotate throughout. So everyone got to work on everything else differently. That didn't mean that they just did it all on their own and they kind of just went off and went kind of rogue. Everyone was involved in that, but someone took the lead on driving that as well. So I think everyone in the talent team was able to get a greater understanding and perspective, learn from each other. I think it helped with the collaboration there and it wasn't just internally with the talent team. Obviously, there's a variety of stakeholders that are involved there. It really helped to build a stronger understanding of the talent team of what our purpose was, what we were doing this for, and kind of how these programs had impact. It also created better collaboration across the business. And ultimately, at the end of this, you're left with, documents and tools and things that the company can use that live on beyond you. If you ever do move on from the business or they evolve over time, whatever it may be. So I think that, they're cool things to reflect on now. And I would kind of strongly advise if anyone wants to do that kind of thing. It's definitely a cool thing to get involved in doing. I think it also, I know we're talking about candidate experience specifically, but I think more broadly as a talent function, it makes you appear more strategic internally to the stakeholders that you're working with, rather than just these people post ads and speak to candidates and fill roles. You're talking about a program of work here where you're really setting the company up for success and creating a set of artifacts that the company can utilize longer term as well. So that's my actionable tip for you there.
And a great tip there. Thank you, Jamie. Finally, over to you, Sinead. What approaches have you found that have consistently worked to create a positive and memorable experience for candidates?
Yeah, look, I think we've seen it all. We've seen the kind of fancy offers presented in Canva. We've seen kind of links to websites that have had a huge amount of money put into them, listing all of the employee benefits. Like, I think I completely agree with Jamie. I think all of that work is so important. But I think as well, when you're thinking about the recruitment experience being memorable, the things that candidates genuinely do remember, and it's because it is unfortunately relatively uncommon, is just that communication piece and doing what you say you're going to do and following up as promised. It's super, super basic. And when I think about sort of creating a memorable experience, I really don't think it needs to be bells and whistles and extra things outside of everything that Jamie's spoken about and that I touched on. I think it really is just remembering that every person who's involved in the process, it is a huge move for them. Job security and looking for work, it's hugely emotional. It can be a scary time, and so the things that genuinely, and we hear so many stories, but the things that genuinely stand out to candidates is the fact that people get back to them and sort of make time for them, and as Jamie said earlier, give them feedback and things like that. And it's basic, but it's very time consuming, and so I think it's really figuring out how to use your resources in a way where you're not letting people down, but you're also sort of being boundaried with your time as well. And it's a really tricky balance. But yeah, do what you say you're going to do, I think, is my overarching bit of advice.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Well, we've covered a lot today. So as mentioned, we're going to be sharing the recording and the slides afterwards. But we do have some time to answer some of the questions that came through the Q&A box. So we might, spend the last few moments here answering some of our audience questions. So first question we've had come through is how to be creative on the first interview to break the ice and let the candidate be comfortable and not nervous. Would anyone like to jump in and answer this one?
Do you want to, Jamie? Are you happy for me to go?
If you have a deep, brummy, monotone voice, that's always very welcoming for people when they join an interview. No, I think that being, like I say, being warm, being welcoming, trying to keep them at ease, trying to keep it relatively informal in style. I think also actually, as we talked, they're kind of outlining what's going to be covered, I think puts people at ease a bit. You can kind of prepare for what's about to happen rather than just your guessing, as you go through the interview. I think saying what you're going to cover off, introducing yourself first and foremost, telling them not to be nervous and calm if you can clearly see that as well. I think, at the end of the day, it's a person speaking to another person. There's no reason for them to be nervous. But again, obviously people deal with those situations differently. And I think also what you can do even prior to the interview is accommodate for those kind of things and ask if there's any special requests. Maybe, there's people who require different ways for that interview to be run as well. And I think being mindful of that and making sure that you have people prepared to interview people in a certain way as well for that is important. So there are a couple of suggestions.
Yeah, I do the same, Jamie. I feel like that's the best way to perhaps put the candidate at ease, know what you're going to be kind of covering in the interview and help them understand how the format, keeping it really conversational as well can certainly help. Cool. Our next question that's come through is we have started headhunting to be very specific on what we are looking for. Can either of you speak to maybe some of the pitfalls of this type of hiring? Maybe bringing it back to also the positives that come from headhunting and being very specific on what you're looking for. Maybe we'll throw to you, Sinead, on this one.
Yeah, for sure. Look, I think it's a really good strategic way of approaching people. You obviously are targeting sort of people who look well suited to the business. I think obviously one of the biggest pitfalls is that headhunting tends to be more passive, so they're not actively looking, you're approaching them. And where we've seen that fall down as a strategy is just that people are interested in exploring. They're not in other processes. They're happy where they are, and they might go through the whole process and then sort of realize, no, thanks for that, but I'm actually happy where I am. So that happens a lot more in sort of a headhunting sort of recruit, rather than when you're going out to market and finding people who are actively looking for work. So I guess that's one thing to be aware of, but also I think again, speaking to the positives, you very much sort of, I think, and Jamie, you might be able to speak more to this, but I think people are flattered when you headhunt, maybe not from an agency because they're used to it, but when an organization directly reaches out and sort of speaks to the personalized nature of their background and their experience, I think that's always a really good sign. It shows that you are proactive. It shows that you are interested, and it's to our conversation earlier about personalization, I think it definitely makes a good impression for organizations. So definitely pros and cons. It's a wonderful thing to make time for if you can, but I think really being aware of the fact that you want high engagement from the people you bring through that process, it's going to be important too.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the only other potential, I mean, there's lots of positives to it. I think the only other potential pitfall I could think of was potentially a lack of diversity in background. Maybe if you're looking for someone specifically very targeted with a certain background, it obviously doesn't open up a broader set of candidates who maybe come from different backgrounds or experiences. And that's why I think there's no one or other way of doing it. That holistic approach of maybe some headhunting mixed with some applicants and other methods as well is probably the best way to approach that. Yeah, it's the only real downside I can think of there.
Yeah, we've actually had a follow-up question to that, so I might just stick to this topic is, yeah, how do we work out really early in the piece that they really are interested? Are there any kind of questions or tactics that you might be using to ensure that, okay, we've approached you in a very passive format, but yeah, how do we kind of get you to the finish line?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something that in the nature of what we do, we would coach the team a lot with these sorts of situations. And essentially what I would say is that first interaction, so whether it's a phone call, whether it's a meet in person, it's really understanding their motivators, really understanding what would make them move, almost pre-closing them before it's you've even, and it needs to be obviously a conversation where you're selling to them too, but just really understanding what their motivators are to see if it's a fit and if it's a match. And then as you go through the process, you know yourself if this is going to be something that is going to be big enough or the right thing for them to move. So I think it's a fine balance because you're approaching them. It's a dance. It's a delicate situation, but at the same time, I think really getting as much clarifying information as possible is ideal.
Nice one. Well, I think we've got time to squeeze in one more question. A little bit of a scenario here. Someone's asked about how would you handle a candidate accepting an offer, but right before they were due to join, they have actually changed their mind. Is there anything that you might be able to share on what the best approach is when I guess, yeah, managing this part of the unfortunate candidate experience?
I think you're in recruitment in general, you're dealing with the most unpredictable thing known to man, which is man itself. And these things happen. I think that sometimes there's not a huge amount you can do about these things. I think one thing I would always seek to do is understand the why behind it. Why did they get to this stage and now they've changed their mind? Is there some of the circumstances that are outside of your control, and that, you know, that's just the way it is, and unfortunately there's not a lot you can do about that? Is it something perhaps where they've there could be an example, just hypothetically here, where someone's moving roles for the first time and they're a bit nervous and they're unsure how that's going to play out, so it's about maybe a bit more hand-holding and kind of coaching through that process. It could be that they've been counter-offered, and again, I think everyone knows the statistics behind counter-offers and how long people then tend to stay at a business, which again, usually the people don't stay is for the counter-offer anyway. So I think that hopefully there's minimal amounts of that happening because you've obviously qualified way in advance earlier on in the process and tried to avoid that. But look, these things do still happen, unfortunately. And again, as mentioned, people are unpredictable and there's not a lot you can do about it sometimes. But as Sinead mentioned, trying to pre-close and do that as much as possible throughout the process, I think is the key there.
Mm-hmm.
Nice one. Well, Thank you so much to Jamie and Sinead for joining us today. That does conclude our webinar. So really want to thank all of our audience for also being here. A survey is going to automatically launch at the end of this webinar. So we'd really appreciate if you took a minute to fill it out for us. And we will be sending some additional resources along with the webinar recording after today's session. So thank you so much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Cheers, Jenny. Cheers, Sinead. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.